think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. What a weekend front. I could not take my eyes off the news and what's going on in Ukraine. The fact that Russia is throwing everything they have at the Ukrainian people, and they're fighting back. They're standing up. They're holding. Now, look, this is one of those moments where you go, the big bad evil bear. Now, you got the Fox News guys say, well, Russia's just being gentle. No. They are bombing the ever-loving you-know-what out of this country, and the people are still, the resolve is still there. And this is what happens when you invade a country. This is what happens when you are the aggressor, when you are viewed as the invader. And what I find interesting is I'm watching the propaganda war. And for all of the Russians' propaganda prowess, for as amazing as they were in 2015 and 16 in rigging our election here and getting Donald Trump into the White House, as amazing as they were at manipulating social media here, they are getting trounced in the social media war. As Ukraine and the Ukrainian people are telling the story. And it's getting out. Now, look, Putin's done what he can do in Russia. We're seeing total grip control over the media and state-sponsored propaganda. That's all that's getting out. That's it. And anybody who dare deviate, 15 years in prison. And look, the right-wing people in this country, the white nationalists, our GQ our grand cute kook party, they're eating it up. This is the world that they want. Now remember, we got those folks here. All of those Putin supporters right here, because they're going to go after, the gays and put them back in the closet, and they're going to put those people back across the border. Got to get those women back where they belong, having babies. Yeah, it's gonna be utopian, white nationalist, conservative, crazy paradise. It's really bizarre, but we've got them here. What I've been paying attention to, though, is the changing message. A lot of things coming out of Russia. A lot of things coming out of this. The message, though, today, in fact, the spokesperson for Russia came out and said that it'll all stop. We'll make it all better. We'll make it all stop if Ukraine agrees to never join NATO, gives us Crimea, and recognizes, the world recognizes we get to keep it. It's ours. We put the flag in the ground. It's ours. Recognize these other two regions as independent. Cease all military actions. This happens, we'll stop immediately, and we'll end it immediately. And you look at these two regions, they're pretty sizable areas to just go, okay, you can have it. And, as I'm listening to him, I go, well, what happened to the Nazi thing? Oh, yeah, that got lost. Because the Nazi thing, I think it was just kind of to inflame. Just to kind of go, oh, there's Nazis. Now, as we find out, Putin has been targeting civilian targets. I said, hey, come on over this way. We'll have a corridor so for humanitarian escape, so civilians can leave, and then bomb that. And what they're saying now, possibly war crimes. And good, about damn time. And let's hope this time we actually follow through. Let's hope this time we actually do something. Now, here's the weird part of this. And again, as I come back to this, I get Putin, maniacal dictator, authoritarian, wants to get the old gang back together. I get that. I get, horrible, murderous dictator. Get it. Knew that all along. Nothing new. Even Donald Trump said, yeah, he's a murderer. Yeah, a lot of murders out there. Ah. Trump gave his spiel over the weekend to a bunch of Republicans at a Republican funder event somewhere in New Orleans. And, he went on about how much he just loved Kim Jong-un. Loved him. Loved the fact that the generals and the aides cowered when he spoke. They snapped to attention whenever he was in total control. Again, understand that's what he wants. When he walks into a room, everybody better snap to control, better snap to attention, pay attention, salute, all that stuff. Better give him his due. And he said, I looked at my people and said, I want my people to act like that. Really? I mean, he said this out loud. And again, there are a lot of people who've wanted this, just never said it out loud. And again, there's a lot of things that, remember, this guy was president. This guy is supposed to understand diplomacy. This guy is supposed to understand stuff. He doesn't. This guy's supposed to understand democracy. Doesn't. Remember, he hired the best people, only the best people, and then fired them all. And then they all came out and said how horrible he was to work for. But they were the best people. But he also said something that, again, grabbed my attention. Because remember, the whole spiel was what his normal spiel is. The election was rigged. I was cheated. The same whiny kind of stuff. No, Vladimir Putin would have never done this if I was in charge. Nonsense. He did go on to say global warming is a hoax, and even if it is real, we could get some new waterfront property out of it. Yes, the president said that. But the amazing part to me is he said this out loud, out freaking loud. Quote, and then we say, China did it. We didn't do it. China did it. And then we start fighting with each other and sit back and watch. His idea, grand idea for this statement. Take U.S. planes, put Chinese flags on them, and bomb Russia. Yes, a U.S. president thought it was a great idea, to use a U.S. plane, put a Chinese flag on it, and bomb Russia, and then go, he did it, and then actually think someone's going to buy that. And this guy wants to be president again. And you know what? There are so many freaking stupid people out there who will vote for him because they'll go, that's tough. That's a tough guy right there. He knows how to get things done. You know why? Because I didn't find that story. Someone emailed that to me. Said that's what we should do. And that person votes. That's scary stuff. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Got a lot to get to today on the Russia front, a lot to get to on inequality, a lot to get to your thoughts. Going to take a quick break when we come back and talk about what's going on the ground in Ukraine. If you're just joining us, make sure you grab the podcast so you never miss a minute. Back with your thoughts, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. This is The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our labor history in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. You know, generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
I gotta tell you, I'm still shocked. You know, the former guy. You know, if I were president, this would have never happened. No, because you'd have probably still been giving stuff away. You'd have probably pulled us out of NATO. And you're right, we wouldn't be involved in this because Putin would have just rolled right in. We'd have given it. We'd have just gone, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. We probably, and this is the scary part of this, probably would have been giving aid to Russia in this moment if Trump were in the White House. That's how screwy this situation is. When you've got white nationalists praising and giving standing ovations when someone says, let's give a round of applause for Putin in this country, blows my mind. But, you know, I guess I shouldn't be surprised that there are so many voices out there in support of Putin and hoping our president fails. It is what it is. And here to share some thoughts on maybe what's going on the ground in Ukraine, and maybe a little background on what's going on. I have asked Dr. Paula Holovayak to come talk with us. She is a professor in the Department of Philosophy and Government at Kutztown University. Dr. Holovayak, thanks for taking time for us.
Hi, good evening.
I understand you have relatives, you have friends, you have people in Ukraine. Do you know how they are? Do you know if they're safe? Have you had any word of what's going on right now?
Yeah, actually, thanks to Facebook and Facebook Messenger, I'm able to communicate directly with people. Our family is more in the western part of Ukraine, and I have really good colleagues in the city of Ivano-Frankivsk. And because Kutztown has an exchange agreement with the Pre-Carpathian University there. And talking to some of the professors, they've sent their families. One young professor has sent his family, his wife, his daughters, and his in-laws to Poland. And they have friends there, so I know that they're okay. Another close friend of mine I've known for probably over 30 years, since we first traveled there. I asked him, are you leaving? And he said, this is my home and my country, and I'm staying to fight.
I'm looking at the news reports, and it looks like, Putin's and his death machine is throwing everything they have. The reports are, 100% of their military is on the border, and they're just bombing indiscriminately. We're reports of cluster bombs, reports of just indiscriminate bombing, of humanitarian, exit ways being bombed. Are we surprised by this?
When you say we, are Americans surprised? I mean, I'm not surprised, both as a political scientist and as a Ukrainian American. I'm not at all surprised. This is the way Putin has operated in Chechnya. He operated this way in Syria. His total disregard for international law and humanity in general. So I think the only thing that's shocking to the Europeans is that now this is occurring at their doorstep in Europe.
Now, what do you make of the argument that, originally it was, because there are Nazis in Ukraine? Are there Nazis in Ukraine?
Well, there's Nazis you mean neo-Nazis. There's neo-Nazis in the United States, too. I made the joke, does that mean Canada is coming to denazify? But no. Ukraine is a vibrant, not perfect, functioning democracy. So like any democracy, there's free speech, there's freedom of religion, there's free press, there are differing ideas, but certainly the leadership of Ukraine is not neo-Nazis. As everyone knows by now, the president of Ukraine is descended from Holocaust survivors. His grandfather survived the Holocaust. He is Jewish. So he would be the last person you would describe as a neo-Nazi.
So, because I'm looking at this and I'm looking at the propaganda coming out, and because there's so much that people don't know about that region, and now it's on the front page. And look, the propaganda war, the media war, the misinformation war, especially here in the U.S., where we've got the Fox channels and all of these right wing cable outlets, and these outrage merchants who keep filling our radio airwaves with it's Ukraine's fault in some way. It's our fault. It's Biden's fault. Where I look at it is it's one guy's fault. It's Putin's fault. This is a one rich guy, one dictator who sent poor and working class Russians into Ukraine to kill poor and working class Ukrainians. I don't see it any other way than that. Is there any other way to look at it than that?
Well, I've tried to keep people focused on the fact that this is Putin's war. Did the United States make missteps in its past policy? Yes. I mean, we can go back to many administrations, Democrat and Republican. And one of the biggest issues is not sufficiently providing for Ukraine to defend itself. Activists in the Ukrainian American community have been advocating in Congress since 2008, for many, many years, to please send the type of weapons that now they finally sent, for example, Javelin missiles. So it's been a bipartisan failure in terms of preparing Ukraine to defend itself. As many people said, Putin only understands strength. You have to come at him from a position of strength. And I guess he perceived Ukraine would fall more quickly and it has not fallen.
Yeah, I mean, but here's the thing, and I keep coming back to why now. Because I guess the application to get into NATO was back in 2008. Was there any serious push to get Ukraine into NATO? I mean, I look at all these excuses, and they keep changing. The reasons keep changing. The narratives attempt to keep changing. I'm trying to figure out the justification. Other than this, just seemed like a good time for Putin to go in because we're divided here. It just seemed like he saw an opportunity and he took it.
Right. So Putin is approaching 70 or is 70, so he's looking at his legacy. And he has never gotten over the fall of the Soviet Union. And Ukraine, as a functioning democracy on his doorstep, was just that thorn in his side. And he's tried to overthrow Ukraine politically. And he tried to do this so-called separatist warfare where he funded an insurgency against the central government. And finally, when that wasn't working, you're right, he probably perceived that the Western allies were not united. And so it might as well give it a try. So that would explain why now.
Because, the Trump people, and I get a bunch of these folks who keep throwing this out, that, if Donald Trump were in the White House, Putin would have never done this. Do you see any argument that you go, he would have never done this because Trump, they were buddies? Do you see that as plausible?
I mean, that's sort of an odd what if situation. I mean,
no, because I'm getting this daily. I'm getting it daily. And my argument back is, well, there's no reason for Putin to have done anything because Trump was giving him everything he wanted. There was talk of pulling the U.S. out of NATO. There was talk of basically giving him whatever he wanted. Trump was basically Putin's lapdog. So the way it appeared from the outside. So I don't know. Maybe it's true.
I can't make that what would have happened should they have, etc. I know that the Trump administration, on the one hand, Trump was very cozy with Putin, but I do know that the policy toward Ukraine has been fairly steady across, many administrations, which is to make sure that Ukraine is a sovereign nation. Now, when you talk about defenses, we can't forget that when Ukraine gave up their nuclear weapons, the United States, Russia, and Great Britain signed a treaty agreeing to protect Ukraine in exchange for them giving up their nuclear weapons. So there's another agreement that has not been kept by anyone. And no, there was probably zero chance of Ukraine coming into NATO anytime in the next 20 years. So that was a bit of a pretext.
Because, again, these seem to be the arguments that keep being thrown out there because Putin does a great job of throwing misinformation and disinformation out there that both the right and the left here in the U.S. seem to be wanting to grab onto. the anti-war left wants to go on to the, well, if we just said no, you'll never be in NATO, then this all stops. Well, that's not it. They just said they want Crimea. They want those other two regions in Ukraine to be independent, I guess, which I guess means under their control, and a whole list of other demands that I'm sure will get much more lengthy as the days go longer. Do you see, I guess the question then becomes, even if Ukraine did agree to all of those things, do you see the list getting longer?
Correct. You mean from Putin?
Yes.
Yeah, there was no way that, right, that was just a bit of a ruse. Putin had every intention of trying to either replace the current government with a pro-Russian government, or now, as we see, really to simply try to dominate the entire country. Again, a functioning democracy on his doorstep threatened his rule, because there would be the possibility of Russians actually doing what Ukrainians did, rising up and wanting democracy and freedom. So that is why Ukraine was a threat to Putin. It was not a military threat in any way, shape, or form.
Now, Dr. Holovac, we're seeing all of these stories. We're seeing all of these stories coming out, these horrible, atrocious stories of, people just being, just brutalized, and the death and destruction. I look at this moment and I can't help but be angry. I can't help but be want vengeance. Is there something that the U.S. should be doing more? Do you see NATO doing more? Where do you see what do you think the international community should be doing, or are they doing enough?
I'm a positive side. I'm happy to read and hear and understand that there's a ton of anti-tank and anti-aircraft weaponry. I think I did hear Lieutenant Bergmann talk about we need to send in more drones. That a no-fly zone doesn't have to be American pilots and planes, but perhaps making sure that more unmanned drones are there would be a way to create a technological no-fly zone. I also heard another American military expert talk about a humanitarian no-fly zone just to enable people to be evacuated. I also understand, though, the great danger of engaging two nuclear powers in the same airspace. And Putin seems not afraid to threaten to use tactical nuclear weapons.
No, it's crazy. Last question I've got for you. You've talked about the Ukrainian people. What about the Russian people? We've seen reports of, there are protests in the street. We've seen reports of thousands of people being arrested. But on the other side, we're now seeing this Z thing coming up. We're seeing this kind of nationalism popping up. What sense are you getting in reality? I know the propaganda wars are going on. What sense are you getting on the ground?
Well, from what we're understanding, when people who have relatives in Russia are calling them or reaching out to them and saying, hey, we're being bombed, they're saying, no, you're not. So they really live, I guess it's hard for us to understand, they really live in an information vacuum. And my understanding is it tends to be generational. So whereas the younger people will reach out to social media for their news, the older people are watching state-owned television. So that's the divide in Russia, is generational more than anything else.
Yeah, just like here in the U.S. Yeah. You got the old people watching that Fox channel going, no, Putin's a great guy. And the younger folks going, wait a second, I think you're missing a whole bunch.
Can I just say, I do, though, what I've seen happen in the last 10 days with the American public, as I've been giving these interviews, is I had to first explain where Ukraine was, 10 days ago.
10 seconds.
I think that as a whole, the American public is horrified by the inhumanity. I have not heard anyone defend Putin on any side as they watch mothers and babies and
thanks so much. Appreciate it. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1974. That was the day that workers at Farah Manufacturing finally ratified its first contract. Workers went on strike in May of 1972, demanding union recognition. Owner Willie Farah had said he'd rather die than have his company go union. It was said that he rode his bicycle through the plant screaming, "Work faster! Work faster!" Management had imposed increasingly unattainable production quotas that bred dangerous working conditions until finally the workers had had enough. The organizing drive to bring the American Clothing Workers of America began in 1969. It spread to 5 plants throughout El Paso, Texas. Workers often met in secret. Though male cutters had initially sought out representation with the ACWA, the workforce was overwhelmingly comprised of Mexican American women. The workers staged a walkout in March of 1972, and many were fired on the spot. By May of that year, the firing of workers at the San Antonio plant for union activity prompted a strike. Declared an unfair labor practice strike, the AFL-CIO began a national boycott campaign of Farah products. The ACWA organized public support and strike relief. Women strikers embarked on a nationwide speaking tour as part of the Justice at Farah Strikers Committee to build the boycott and public support. By early 1974, the NLRB ordered the workers to be reinstated and union organizing to go forward. The contract included wage increases, seniority rights and job security, and grievance procedures. But long-term lessons of the strike proved that the work of organizing could never stop with winning recognition and a first contract. Workers continued to battle for years against quotas, firings, and weak representation in a historically right-to-work state.
Republican politicos are all over Joe Biden for failing to stop inflation. Perhaps you wonder, though, what these squawkers would do if they were in charge. No need to wonder. Just look back to 1974, when Americans were being pummeled by price spikes that topped 12%, nearly double what we're enduring today. But by gollies, President Gerald Ford and his Republican contingent in Congress met the challenge head-on with a new magical program of economic uplift they called WIN, Whip Inflation Now. But it was nothing, just a political slogan with no magic and no action behind it. Price controls, antitrust action? No. GOP Inc. didn't want to offend, much less punish, corporate titans for a little profiteering. So they shifted the blame for inflation to consumers, demanding that families just say no to price gouging. Ford himself went on national TV, urging fellow citizens to join him in buying, quote, only those products and services priced at or below present levels. The core of the Republican program, then, was telling hard-hit wage earners to battle the monopolistic behemoths of big oil, big pharma, big food et al. On their own by simply refusing to pay inflated prices for the gasoline, medicines, groceries, and such that, hello, they had to have. As a reward, everyone who signed a form promising to be an inflation fighter was sent a nifty win button indicating their patriotic participation. Sure enough, Americans responded enthusiastically with an avalanche of ridicule. Even Ford's top economic advisor was whopper-jawed by the GOP's idea that the substance of their policy was a political button. It was surreal. I said to myself, this is unbelievable stupidity.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So it's being reported that Russia's got nearly 100% of its combat forces on the border with Ukraine. And, the vast majority of its resources heading in that direction. And yet still the people are, they're holding up. And as we know, Russia's going to bomb the ever-loving you-know-what out of them. And at some point, the international community, I think, is going to have to do much more. And here to share some thoughts on what's going on, what we know, and, well, how bad this could actually get. I've asked Max Bergmann to come talk with us. Max is a senior fellow over at the Center for American Progress, AmericanProgress.org, their website. Max, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks so much for having me.
So what are we seeing so far? What do we know that's going on? We talked earlier with Professor Holovayak, and she gave us some thoughts. I'd like to get yours.
So I think what we're seeing is it's a conflict that I don't think it's going to end very quickly. Um, and I think what happened is in the first 10 days that Russia had a completely asinine plan, asinine strategy, thought that Ukraine would just sort of fold very quickly. They thought firing some cruise missiles at some Ukrainian military bases, and then basically just sending in, some battalions to just sort of drive in, or small units, and the population would greet them as liberators, and they would just easily sort of march, down to Kyiv and occupy the country, get rid of the Zelensky regime, and it would be done in a matter of days. And I mean, so we're seeing that was sorely mistaken. So on the one hand, Russia's strategy has been so awful, and the Ukrainian will to fight has been awe-inspiring, that Ukraine has inflicted tremendous damage on Russia's military. I mean, the vehicles that have been lost, the casualties. But that said, this is still the Russian army. And I think there may be a little bit too much triumphalism right now about Ukraine winning. It's too early to say who's winning and who's losing. I mean, I don't think there is any sort of clear path to victory for Russia, even if they were to take Kyiv tomorrow and Zelensky would be captured. I still don't think they quote unquote win, because then they have to occupy and rule the country that is going to, I think, rise up and revolt.
Right.
So there's no path there. But what we're seeing militarily is the Russians are making gains on the ground. But then after they take a city or capture some terrain and then move on, then there's mass protests against the Russian occupiers. So, I think this looks like we're headed for a major siege of the capital of Kiev, and we'll see. I think Ukrainians feel like they have the momentum. I think the weapons that we're providing them are making a huge difference in just having, or wearing down the Russian forces. And I think the bigger question, and one of the larger questions, is just from a logistical standpoint, is as Russia sort of enters deeper into Ukraine. Now, Ukraine is the largest country in Europe outside of Russia, basically the size of France. So the further you get from the Russian border, the harder it is to supply fuel, food, all of those things. And we're seeing Ukrainians deliberately target a lot of the fuel convoys, support the forward deployed Russian forces. So, I mean, does this just become a total military quagmire for Russia? I think the answer is likely yes, but I think the question is, does it become so apparent that this is a military disaster, in the next week? Or is it going to take a while for that to be? Does a massive insurgency have to unfold first? Are we going to see the siege of Kyiv? I mean, there's a lot more twists and turns here, but this is right now, I think, a total debacle and disaster for Vladimir Putin and for Russia, and for the people of Ukraine first and foremost. But Putin's not winning here.
No, I mean, there's no winning in this. I don't think. Because look, at the end of the day, all these poor working class people, all these people they're screwed. I mean, I'm looking at these cities being bombed. I'm looking at all these people's homes just being totally devastated. I'm looking at the lives that are broken, the lives that are lost. I'm looking at even if it ends today, you're talking probably at least another decade before you get anywhere close to back to where you were. So there's no winning in this for the people of Ukraine. They've already lost. It's just a matter of how bad this losing is going to be, I think.
Yeah, and I think also for the Russian troops that were sent into a war, and what's been coming out is that the Russian forces didn't even realize what the hell was going on. They thought they were doing a training exercise in Belarus, didn't realize that they were actually about to head off into combat. We're told right before. And so that's what you're seeing, a lot of defections, Russian POWs, and they're POWs, so you can't necessarily, their videos could be done under duress. But what seems really clear is that this was just the Russian public wasn't prepared, the Russian troops aren't prepared, and so you have Russian mothers at home not even realizing that their kids have been sent to war, then getting phone calls that that their sons are dead, and this is going to have I think a real political impact back in Russia. Maybe not right away, but as these casualties expand, it's going to play. It's just as Iraq war deaths and Afghan war deaths like played a real toll, on Middle America and in places all around the country. It's same as happening in Russia, where people are like, "Why are we doing this? What is happening? Why was my son sent to this?" So, this is also a disaster for Russia, with its economy now being effectively shut down. So this is just a war where everyone's losing. It makes no sense that what the decision to invade Ukraine.
So if it makes no sense, I keep coming back to why this moment, because I can't find anyone to say, oh yeah, Russia, Ukraine was going to be in NATO. I can't find anyone to say no. There was a streamlined path into the EU. I can't find anything that says all of the justifications that Putin has thrown out there are anywhere near valid. It makes no sense. Why now?
Well, this is why having autocratic governments, having a dictator in charge is not a good place to be, and why having a representative democracy in which the people get to vote, get to judge their leaders and vote and replace them matters. Because I think the decision making here was driven by, you have a leader that's in power for 22 years in Vladimir Putin, who sees himself as sort of a great czar, who then starts reading lots of history. It's like, well, the big black mark on Putin's tenure is that he lost Ukraine. That in 2004, in 2014, there were two revolutions against basically pro-Russian leaders, and for him, Ukraine is a critical part to the Russian Empire.
Yeah.
This is imperialism. This is Russia, and part of his whole tenure is to make Russia strong again, to make Russia great again, to make Russia part of to be seen and respected on the world stage. And he sees Ukraine as critical of that. He lost Ukraine. So, when he starts thinking about his legacy of 22 years in power as sort of this new czar, well, he wants Ukraine to be part of that. He wants to be seen as having reconstructed, the great Russian Empire. So, so this is sort of about the hangups of one man. And I mean, it's absurd, but that's, I think, where we are. So he makes the decision to take all this power that the Russian state has and use it to just a catastrophic end, which is to destroy this new democracy in Ukraine, which then just brings misery to his people, to the Ukrainian people. It's just it's a catastrophic decision, and I think has potentially pushed him. I think will be seen as bring sort of the beginning of the end of the Putin regime. I don't know when that will take place. It could be for years, but this changes things.
No, this changes a lot of things, and I want to get to some of that. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show here with Max Bergmann. Max is a senior fellow at the Center for American Progress. AmericanProgress.org is their website. If you've got a thought, a question, something on your mind you want to ask Max, give us a call, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. If you're just joining us, make sure you grab the podcast so you never miss a second. Now, you said things are changing. This is going to change things. Their economy, Russia's economy, looks like it's on the verge of collapse. They're talking about a controlled bankruptcy, like something on the level of Venezuela. They're talking about junk status for their debt, all this kind of stuff. There's also talk of somehow moving with China and doing some kind of payment system with the Chinese. Is this kind of a reorganization of the global economic system? That the BRIC countries wanted to have their own way of having currency away from the dollar. Is this kind of a hurry up move potentially to get to that?
Look, I don't think so. And I think for the simple reason that Russia's not big enough economically. Russia may be a big military power. It's got as many nuclear weapons as we have, but geographically, it's a huge country. It's a huge energy exporter, but it's ultimately the economy the size of Italy. So, I don't think we're going to see, massive remaking of the global financial system to accommodate an autocratic leader who just made a crazy decision. And I think I think we'll see how much support China can provide because, Chinese companies especially the private one, semi-private ones, state-owned ones. Like they don't want to be sanctioned by the U.S. They don't want to have exposure to that as well. And also, Russia's simply going to have a problem in getting a lot of the kind of advanced machinery, different high tech, things like semiconductors, but also just things that go into auto plants or to anything that goes into their defense industry. Something breaks and then they need to call in a part that is made in Germany or made in the U.S. Suddenly, they're not going to get that. And so what that means is that countries like India that are dependent on Russia for their defense industry, for their defense forces that depend on the Russian defense industry, I don't know if the Russian defense industry is going to be a reliable supplier. So that changes, it's going to be really world altering, I think, in terms of a lot of alliances we have on the military side. On the financial side, I just don't think Russia is going to be strong enough to get anyone to really bend over backwards to accommodate them. So so this is where I think the pressure really builds. Like the only response that Putin can have to the economic deprivation that is coming to Russia is through basically a totalitarian crackdown, and that's what we're seeing. Is this sort of that anyone that says anything against the war is then can be sentenced to jail for sort of treasonous charges for I think up to 15 years. So that it's quite serious. It closed down media, radio stations, and TV stations. No, Russia was a highly autocratic country, but it wasn't a totalitarian country. And there's a difference, right? Where people could sort of speak out, you could sort of tweet. There was not free speech, but it was like you didn't have you sort of knew where the boundaries were. But now that has totally changed, no. and I don't know if a Russian society that had sort of become used to being on Facebook and Twitter and access to the West, then suddenly you're completely cut off. You can't get on airplanes right now to really leave the country. Like all these things have been taken away. And I think that's going to really erode Putin's support over time. Really just last thought here is that his bargain with the Russian people was partly built off, he came in 2000, there was mafia, capitalist craziness of the 1990s. And he brought an end to that. He brought order to Russia, brought some stability. There was economic prosperity. There was oil prices then went up in the 2000s. And the basic bargain was like, look, you're going to live in a fairly stable economy, stable society, but you're going to have to deal with you're not really going to have democracy. There's going to be some repression. And the Russian people were generally okay with that. But now, if there's like total economic instability and massive repression, the bargain is gone. So we'll see how it plays out for him internally.
Yeah, we'll see. I did want to get your thought on this retired Colonel Douglas McGregor's statement on the one of the Fox channels. McGregor, obviously one of the former guys, senior advisors to the Secretary of Defense. He went on, saying that I'm going to get there. Russia's being too gentle was his statement. That Zelensky's being a puppet, and that Russia's being too gentle. I got to tell you, I can't. Having watched the videos over the weekend, having seen the bombs being dropped, seeing basic carpet bombing of that country, I don't know that that's something I would have said.
Yeah, it's just an abhorrent comment, and it's shocking to me that guy served in the U.S. government, served in the U.S. military, and would make such a comment. Anyone that saw the front page of the New York Times with the death of a family that was trying to flee, which they believed was a humanitarian corridor, and then were bombed and died there on the pavement. Anyone that's seen the footage of Kharkiv, a major city of Ukraine, which I've been to in 2014, and just seeing the central square, just parts of the city just completely pulverized. No, I don't think Russia is being too gentle. And the notion that Zelensky is a puppet, I mean, the guy won a democratic election with 75% of the vote. It just is, it's a completely idiotic comment. It's a completely obscene comment. And, unfortunately, I think that is, maybe McGregor has a hotline to Vladimir Putin, because I think that's sort of channeling probably where Russia is headed and where Vladimir Putin's going, which is that they've run into massive problems. Their initial strategy didn't work, and now they're going to resort to doing what they did in the Chechen wars, which is to just obliterate cities and cause a humanitarian catastrophe. And I think that's what we all fear. That's what we see coming toward Kyiv, because they can't really achieve their military objectives, and so Putin is just going to try to bomb his way out of it. It's not going to work, but it's going to be a total tragedy, and it's going to be something that I think is going to completely, even if the world is shocked now, it's going to be very the reaction after what if Russia does what we all fear it will do. I think we're going to start seeing massive efforts to really go after Russian oil, Russian gas, and really just essentially embargo the country. But that comment is just beyond the pale.
What more should the U.S. be doing? I mean, I have a lot of friends who are, on all sides of the issue. I said from the beginning, I have no interest in sending U.S. troops in the event that we start that what you're saying is probably going to happen. At some point, NATO, I think, has to potentially be involved. I'm curious what you think should happen, might happen. What do you foresee?
So this is the tragedy and the problem of being in a conflict with a nuclear armed superpower, which is what the fight that Ukraine is in, is that provides a check on us. That provides a real limitation on what we can do. And we just have to recognize that is a really unfortunate reality of the nuclear age that we live in. And that if we, this notion of a no-fly zone, now it sounds really antiseptic, right? It's just sort of, we're just going to prevent planes from flying. But no, it means we're sending in U.S. boys to go and, fight Russian fighter jets. And then that means bombing Russian targets on the ground if they're operating anti-air. So it is, and then how we operate over a country the size of France to protect a no-fly zone. I mean, it's a massive undertaking, and one that Putin has warned could potentially lead to nuclear escalation. So we just have to realize that that's just not an option. We just don't have that ability. What we can do is what I think we are doing, and which is proving really effective, which is that we are arming the crap out of the Ukrainians. We are sending in massive amounts of weaponry, not stuff that is like, we look at James Defense and like Patriot missile systems that are the sort of things that like the U.S. military operates. But no, we are sending things in that are very practical for the fight that Ukraine is in. Javelin missiles, which are anti-tank, anti-aircraft, Stinger missiles, but also just small arms, body armor, meals ready to eat. Because if you're sitting there on the front lines and you have no food, having something that maybe tastes bad, but you can just rip open a canister and have some calories is really useful. We are sending in the practical things that Ukraine needs to operate. And I think that's a lot of lessons learned, frankly, from past U.S. security assistance failures, where we're like, let's equip the Afghans with this new Air Force. Instead of just being like, okay, we need to train, and we spent 8 years training the Ukrainian military on how to fight, how to do command and control. We've given them things like secure communication so they can talk to each other without the Russians identifying. They were using Russian cell phones in like 2014, and so the Russians would just pinpoint them and destroy them. So we are providing really practical kit. And I think that's what we need to keep doing. And it just needs to be something that we keep doing. And this is, unfortunately, the Ukrainians fight. And it's not that we're not doing anything. I mean, we are taking a sledgehammer to the Russian economy. We've isolated Russia globally. The costs on Russia are just enormous. It's like, they're not going to be able to sustain this fight indefinitely. And so Ukraine has a real fighting chance here. But we just have to recognize there's a check, right? They have a hostage, which is called nuclear weapons. Yeah, and that's just something we have to respect.
Now, that's a difficult argument to make to people, because I'm sure you saw the poll, as everyone else did, that 74% of the people are in favor of imposing a no-fly zone, which I said when I saw it, I go, well, that's potentially going, yep, we're ready for World War III.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't expect the public to say like, I don't support enough. I mean, no-fly zones sound really fine, but if the question is, do you support a no-fly zone if that it leads to a risk of nuclear war? The answer is probably no. And I think it's important to add that second part of the question. So, I think that is the reality that we're in. And let me just say, I think the Biden administration did an extremely smart thing by saying back in December that we are not going to send American forces to fight Russia because it just took it off the table. And right now, if that wasn't said, then I think you'd see a lot more demand for the U.S. to militarily engage. And it would be a reversal of Biden's position to create a no-fly zone. So I think being clear early on with the Russians, with the Ukrainians about where we stood, I think was exactly the right thing to do. And so it sucks. I think we have to just recognize that is it's a real and I get the Ukrainians are desperate to get us into this fight, and that's something we have to recognize. They are desperate to get us in this fight because we would be doing the same thing. Come and help us. Come and help us. They want America to just come in and just destroy the colony. But it's a nuclear age.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you, Max. Max, I appreciate the time, man. Good stuff. Thanks.
Thanks so much.
Max Bergmann, Senior Fellow there at the Center for American Progress. You can check out their website, AmericanProgress.org. And look, I said that from the beginning. I'm not, the no-fly zone sounds very sanitary, sounds easy. All it takes is that one engagement, that one thing that then trips this into, well, it's the optics. It's no longer about bombing the people of Ukraine. No, this is about Russia versus the U.S. Then it becomes, oh, hey, now we have justification to, start lobbing nukes at each other, and that is the wrong place to be. I agree. We give them all of the arms that they need. Now, look, I fully expect at some point very soon, and I'm sure it's going to happen sooner as opposed to later, that Putin and his clan say just by arming the Ukrainians that is an act of war. Just by giving them the support that we're giving them, that is an act of war. He's already said that by sanctioning the economy, that's an act of war. So I'm waiting to see how this all plays out, because ultimately, one guy, that's it. One rich guy has done this. Millions of people are going to suffer. And here, look, you've got the chaos merchants here who are just itching to get us involved in this. You've got the people who are wanting our president to fail. I spent a little time listening to the outrage candy folks today on talk radio, losing their mind about it. Oh, Joe Biden's weak. Joe Biden's a disgrace. Joe Biden's horrible. Joe Biden's done the best job you could do in this situation. Because Max was right. Smartest thing he did is we're not sending troops there. We're going to use our economy. We're going to use the tools we have, but we're not getting involved. We're not escalating this. The Ukrainians are going to have to fight for themselves. We're going to give them all the support we can, but we're not getting involved in it. That, and look, we just got out of 20 years of war. This could be another 20 years. Not that I think Russia's economy will last that long, because I don't think the Chinese are going to bail them out that long. I don't think the Chinese are going to take them on that for that long. And at some point, I think you will see. The U.S. moving to do more energy production here, moving towards alternative energies as well, and you will see Europe, getting energy from other places. Germany's kind of rethinking that whole mistake of, yeah, we can get it from Vlad. Vlad's not a bad guy. Yeah. It is what it is. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thoughts, questions, comments, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you're just joining us, make sure you grab the podcast there at thericksmithshow.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
We're done talking about infrastructure weeks. We're now talking about an infrastructure decade.
Biden touts infrastructure and clean energy in State of the Union address. Majority of Americans willing to shoulder higher gas prices to help Ukraine. Plus, another big oil giant pulls out of Russia.
Are they American?
Yes.
Well, God bless America. All of those stories and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Germany shutting down the pipeline led former Russian Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev to tweet about the high-priced natural gas they'll now face. Welcome to the new world where Europeans would soon have to pay 2,000 euros per 1,000 cubic meters. Whoa, that is a lot. Or a little. The metric system means nothing to me.
Ditto. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, the tragic, terrible, awful impacts of what we're seeing in Ukraine are bad enough. Add to that now the economic impacts around the world.
Yes, indeed. Although it may ultimately hit Russia the hardest, its oil and gas industry is getting pummeled. Oil giant ExxonMobil announced that it is joining Shell, BP, and other oil majors in announcing it will exit its role in a major Russian oil and gas project and cease any new investments in the country following Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
Well, that took long enough for Exxon.
Yep, and Norway's $1 trillion sovereign wealth fund, the world's largest, will also divest its Russian assets.
Ouch, that's going to leave a mark.
And the Nord Stream 2 pipeline is now dead. The Russian-owned operator declared bankruptcy and let go all of its employees.
Sad.
Here in the U.S., the Biden administration says it will tap the Strategic Petroleum Reserve to ease gasoline prices. Lawmakers from both parties are pushing the White House to ban imports of Russian oil. But industry analysts say it may be unnecessary because Russia's oil exports are already taking a major hit from the oil company's exit.
Also sad.
A new Reuters poll found a majority of Americans, nearly 60%, said that paying more for fuel and gas because of the crisis in Ukraine was worthwhile to defend another democratic country. That's up 10 points from last week.
So nearly 60. The other 40 are just, they want cheaper gas, no matter how many people have to die for it.
Russia's war on Ukraine was a major focus of President Biden's wide-ranging State of the Union address on Tuesday, but he spoke only briefly on climate change and environmental justice. It was a missed opportunity to inform Americans about the necessity of swift climate action in the wake of a new UN report this week that climate impacts are more severe than expected and governments are running out of time to adapt to worse effects to come. Biden instead touted the infrastructure law, the largest infrastructure investment in U.S. history, and the jobs that come with it.
We're done talking about infrastructure weeks. We're now talking about an infrastructure decade. It's going to transform America.
Biden didn't mention the Build Back Better Act that was sabotaged by Democratic Senators Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema. Instead, he touted executive actions he's taken to rebuild domestic manufacturing and a flood of new projects from the infrastructure law.
We'll create good jobs for millions of Americans, modernizing roads, airports, ports, waterways, all across America. And we'll do it to withstand the devastating effects of climate change and promote environmental justice. We'll build a national network of 500,000 electric vehicle charging stations. Begin to replace the poisonous lead pipes so every child, every American has clean water to drink at home and at school.
Biden also called on Congress to pass elements of the stalled or dead Build Back Better Act with investments that would boost the economy and lower long-term inflation and costs for working families.
I call it building a better America. Let's cut energy costs for families, an average of $500 a year by combating climate change. Let's provide an investment tax credits to weatherize your home and your business, to be energy efficient and get a tax credit for it. Double America's clean energy production in solar, wind, and so much more. Lower the price of electric vehicles, saving another $80 a month that you're not going to have to pay at the pump. Folks,
Surprisingly, Biden didn't mention that last week the Interior Department's first offshore wind lease sale shattered records for offshore energy development. It was the nation's highest grossing offshore energy lease sale in history of all types of energy, including oil and gas. The New York and New Jersey region is setting up to be a wind energy manufacturing hub, showing how a clean energy and climate agenda can boost domestic manufacturing and create jobs while tackling climate change.
Nice. Very nice indeed. You got to give credit to Joe Biden. He's still trying. And, of course, Joe Manchin is still going to be blocking him. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I use the Jay Gould quote quite often. I can pay half the working class to murder the other half. Because the reality is we do. We slice and dice ourselves up nicely. And we do it to ourselves. We don't even need to pay anymore. Male, female, white, black, gay, straight. We do it. Blonde hair, knots. We slice and dice ourselves up easily to be exploited, easily to be ripped off. And then we choose our political parties, which is another way that we end up dividing ourselves. And again, same problems keep getting worse. And I'm looking at the gas prices. Yeah, gas prices are getting crazy. But you know who's going to benefit in all this? The same people who always do. ExxonMobil's profits are going to go up. Shell's profits are going to go up. BP's profits are going to go up. The CEOs are going to be fat and happy. You're going to pay more, and you're going to complain every time, and you're going to point at Joe Biden like he did it. They did it. They're the ones making the profit off of it. Their profits never seem to hurt, do they? No, it's because that's how the game is already rigged before we even start. That's why I've asked Michael Mechanic to come talk with us. Michael's an author and a longtime senior editor over at the great magazine Mother Jones. He's got a book out called Jackpot, How the Super Rich Really Live and How Their Wealth Harms Us All. It's coming out on paperback. In paperback on April 12th. It's been out in hardback for a while. You can get that wherever you get your books. I suggest Powell's books. But April 12th in paperback, the book Jackpot. Michael, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So I come to this premise, and then your book, I'm sure, is in that same spot, and I'm looking forward to the paperback like everyone else. The rich get richer, the poor keep getting poorer, and the game, before it's even played, already rigged. We know what the outcome's going to be. Just like the gas prices, we know Exxon, Shell, BP, this whole thing, they're going to do very well. Thank you very much.
I mean, it's so rigged that it's almost like, why bother to play, right? I mean, in fact, there's a part of my book where I sit down with a researcher who studies wealth, the psychology of wealth, sort of how it affects our behaviors. And he did an experiment where he pitted participants, volunteers in games of Monopoly, and he totally rigged the games. So like one person had twice as much money, one person got to roll 2 dice versus 1, things like that. And he made this totally rigged game, flipped the coin to see who was the rich player and who was the poor player, and then would let them play for 15 minutes and then kind of debrief them. And what happened is the people who were the richer players started, being really aggressive and condescending towards the other players and puffing up physically and getting bigger. And, the funny thing is, like, afterwards, they said, well, what did you do to succeed in this game? Tell me about your gameplay. And the rich players more than twice as likely than the poor players to talk about their strategies and how they had won this through their talent. When in fact, it was a flip of a coin. It was like, it's like the Lucky Sperm Club, right?
Yep.
It's the way you're born and your circumstances. but we tend to look at our circumstances and see the obstacles and say, I worked hard, and so I deserve what I got. And therefore, these other people who aren't doing well, they deserve what they got too. And so that's a problem we have in America. We like you were talking about slicing and dicing. Well, we look at other groups of people and we say, oh, look at those guys are doing poorly, so they're lazy. They're undeserving. But that's not the way of reality.
And we do that in public policy as well, Michael. I mean, we have the deserving and the undeserving poor, and we do public policy based on how we think they deserve to be treated. And the perfect example is, during the pandemic, we were given $250 to families who had children to help, alleviate childhood poverty. And we cut childhood poverty in this country by half, by just a meager amount of $250 a month per child. Cut it in half, and yet you've got a senator from one of the poorest states in the country saying, no, those poor people, they're just going to use that money to go buy drugs and booze. We can't do that.
Yeah, I mean, the fact is when poor people do get money, they use it pretty responsibly. They have, a quarter of this nation is in debt. If you ask people to talk about, what is the wealth of the lower 50% of this country? How much wealth do families have? And there were actually some scientists, guys named Michael Norton and Dan Ariely, who did an experiment where they asked Americans, like 5,000 Americans, about this. They said, well, what's your estimate of the wealth distribution for like different quintiles? And they guessed the lower 40% owned about 9% of all the wealth. In fact, at the time, they owned 0.3%. And the reason that the lower 40% could own like zero is because a quarter of the country's in debt, right? So it all evens out. We've got 2/5 of America with not a pot to piss in, and like nothing.
No, because we're in debt to the ownership class. We're in debt to the rich people. They're the ones who give us payday lenders. They're the ones who come up with all of these schemes to get us tied into long-term debt. That we end up paying them. I mean, we see it all over TikTok and all these social media sites.
Yeah, the latest thing is with housing in the pandemic. These private equity companies are buying up apartment buildings and single-family houses because they got depressed at some point when the pandemic took off and there was lockdown and people were fleeing cities and so forth. So they buy up all these buildings. Now the prices are going up. They're jacking up rents. They're kicking people out. I mean, it's happening in cities all over the country.
Yeah, I happened to see a video of the baseball player Alex Rodriguez, and I'm picking on him because I saw him, say this. He said that him and his buying group, this equity fund, they go and they buy through the red states because they only invest in red states because there are less regulations and less nosy people looking around to make sure that they're not doing bad things. They live in blue states, but they invest in red states. But they buy up all these houses for $100,000 a door, and then they charge $1,200 a month, and they leverage them to the hilt, and they keep doing it. They own about 38,000 doors across the country, and they're just making tons of money off of just being deeply in debt and raising tons of money so they can do it more and more, so they can keep poor people deeper and debt and never owning a home.
Yeah, dependent on paycheck to paycheck. I mean, actually, after the book, I wrote a piece just recently about retirement savings, and you wouldn't really think about retirement savings as a big rich poor thing, but in fact, our government spends $380 billion a year to subsidize retirement savings, and almost all of that goes to the very top, because like half of Americans don't even have a retirement account.
Yeah. No, very few. You
They're
look at the
giant
average
tax. It's a massive amount of money, and so I'm constantly surprised. I kind of going into this book, I sort of knew I was going to run into in certain areas, but when you put every possible area together, like it's always like you said, always the rich get richer. It is baked right into our policies.
Well,
and it is Congress doesn't want to do anything about it.
Well, I don't know that it's. Yeah, I think back to a friend I had who was in Congress for a number of years, and he said, no one's ever bought my vote, but because we have a system that's based on I have to raise so much money every day, they get 15 minutes in my ear. And if I keep hearing the same people giving me money say the same thing, I'm more inclined to maybe think that way eventually. And he said, even over time, my thinking almost evolves into a different direction. And I think some of that is true, where you see good people go into Congress with the right intentions, with the right ideas, and then they're just inundated with all of the moneyed interests and the lobbyists who are going, no, we can do all this wonderful stuff. We can help the poor by just giving to the rich people, and it'll trickle down. It'll be wonderful. Just give, our billionaire class a little bit more, Michael. A little bit more, Michael. It'll be great. It'll trickle down. Our pockets will fill eventually. More tax cut for corporate America. We'll get some jobs eventually, and it never happens, does it?
Yeah, no. I mean, it also is that way. There are rich people are not all bad, obviously.
No.
Like, there's some people really well-meaning, well-intentioned. There's people out there publicly saying we should be taxed more. We're not paying our fair share. Calling for the government to do something. But but then when you talk to them, they will admit to you that they're taking all the shortcuts and advantages by which they can reduce their taxes, right?
Sure.
And you say, well, in some ways that's counterintuitive, but at the same time, the whole thing is like, don't hate the player, hate the game. He's like, I'm trying to change things, but I got to play by the rules the way they are. But then you wonder how the rules are ever going to change if they don't take a real stand. Because, a stand as in lobby against themselves, essentially.
But isn't that where we come into the play, Michael? At the end of this, I keep saying this, there's, the right-wing spin machine has done such a great job of making the working class of this country angry about all of the wrong stuff. If it's abortion, it's gay marriage, it's, now it's Biden, the outrage candy factory on the right wing. They do an amazing job of keeping the working class angry at everything but what really matters. And that's the fact that they're being robbed and ripped off at every turn, and that they don't seem upset about. They actually look at the billionaire class with some kind of, I don't know, to steal the Steinbeck line, they're kind of embarrassed millionaires that they think somehow they're going to be, that billionaire.
That's totally right. There's actually, I cite this interview in my book where Bono from U2 is talking to who's the guy from CNN?
Anderson Cooper?
Larry King.
Oh, Larry King.
Yeah, so he says, in America, you guys, like, you see the millionaire in the mansion on the hill, and you look up at it and go, someday I could live in that mansion. And in Ireland, we see the millionaire up on the hill, and we go, someday I'm going to get that bastard. And that is it. We have what's called mobility optimism. We think we are more capable of moving between financial classes than we really are.
And the reality is, and to your point is, we're not. And it's gotten worse over the last 40 years. In fact, there was a study done not too long ago by the Rand Corporation that pointed out that, we've been getting more ripped off over the last 45 years as unions have been broken, as, tax policy has gone in the favor of the rich in corporate America, to the tune of like $2 trillion a year of redistribution of wealth from you and me and the people who work for a living up to those folks who the hardest day's work they do is moving money from one pocket to the other.
Yeah, one thing I just never understand is the preferential treatment we give to capital profits, like investment profits, over labor. Because, it really makes no sense, right? It should be the opposite, if anything. And you'll ask rich people to say, well, why should capital gains get special tax preferences? And they say, well, it incentivizes investment. You say, yeah, but what are you going to do with your money? You're going to shove it under your mattress? You're still going to invest. You're still going to build companies. You're still going to, because that's what you do, right?
Yep.
I just don't understand the argument. It's BS,
No, because we want more for us. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're with Michael Mechanic. Mike's an author and longtime senior editor at Mother Jones Magazine. You can check out his website, readjackpot.com. We'll get links out on social media. The book, get the book coming out in paperback on April 12th. Jackpot, How the Super Rich Really Live and How Their Wealth Harms Us All. The reality is, and look, I have some people that I know who are they're really well off. I wouldn't put them in I wouldn't put them near the 1%, but they do really, really well. and they lead a life that I don't understand, that I couldn't possibly lead. And as my one relative says, his house, I couldn't even afford the upkeep, let alone to afford to own it. And look, he's right. I mean, that's the kind of wealth he has. The kind of people we're talking about are people that even he couldn't afford their lifestyle. So to talk about, people who aren't paying their fair share of taxes and a system that is rigged, we're talking about people who have unimaginable wealth. I mean, I think my mind could go to some pretty incredible places, but I think it's almost unimaginable where some of these people have the kind of resources and wealth some of these folks have.
Yeah, I mean, my kind of baseline for the book was 30 million and up. And then you talk to people, who have hundreds and hundreds of millions. There's a guy I talked to who's a lawyer for some of the richest families in America. And he told me these just crazy stories. Like, you ever seen Crazy Rich Asians? The bride's family hires a detective, or the groom's family hires a detective to check out the poor girl the son wants to marry. And this guy's, oh yeah, I do that all the time. These families just, they snap their fingers and they have an entourage of people around them to sort of do their bidding and solve all their problems. And the fact is they do have a lot of problems. Like having that much money, it's like an albatross sitting on your shoulder. There was there's a hedge funder named Leon Cooperman, and there was a piece on him in the Washington Post recently. And he's sort of aging hedge funder. And one thing that he said he sits around his house and he calls in like 7 times a day to his firm. How are we doing? How are we doing? And to me, that's just like, I wouldn't want to be so obsessed with money, frankly, to be always tracking it and always thinking about it. I mean, that's a detriment in life, if you ask me. It also wreaks havoc with your social relationships and your friendships and your marriages and all of this.
It is a passion. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show here with Michael Mechanic, author of Jackpot, the book. Make sure you get it, coming out in paper book. Read jackpot.com, the website. If you got a thought, question, you want to talk to Michael, give us a call, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. What's the most obscene thing that you've seen? As you were doing research for this book, I'm sure something made you stop in your tracks and go, man, this is just ridiculous.
Let's see.
We got kids who are going to bed hungry every night. We can't get people health care when they need it. And yet you see the kind of opulence, the kind of obscene wealth. I mean, I have a friend who, his family has like this giant palatial place where they live, and they have a swimming pool they've never actually gone into. I mean,
that's how my book starts. Actually, one of this guy's never been in his swimming pool. He's one of the most high-paid coders in Silicon Valley, and he actually hit the jackpot at Netscape when back when that's the company that started the dot-com boom, and he was in his 20s, and all of a sudden he'd been there 3 months, and all of a sudden he's got $10 million or whatever. And what happens is these guys, this is kind of funny. They all talked about this as a shared trauma because they didn't know what to do with themselves. They were kind of lost and flailing. All these young people suddenly with like tens of millions of dollars, and they had no idea how to deal with it. And they would, we find our meaning in life often through our pursuits and work and doing things that kind of bring us satisfaction. When you're young and you're sitting on a gigantic pot of money. Okay, here's something that's crazy to me. There's something called a grantor trust, which Congress created by accident. They were trying to fix another problem. They were trying to fix a tax dodge. They created this thing called a GRAT, Grantor Retained Annuity Trust. And this thing allows people to avoid the estate tax altogether, essentially. And the estate tax, you're allowed to give away almost $24 million right now. If you're married, you and your wife can give your children $24 million without paying a penny in tax.
Wow.
Which is absolutely insane, but it's not enough for these folks with hundreds of millions of dollars. They're like, we don't want to pay that tax. So they use these really complicated trusts to pass like hundreds of millions and billions of dollars. And this stuff is all legal. And it was created by, in error. And yet Congress refuses to fix it. they tried in this reconciliation bill, but you know, how do you leave that in place?
Yeah, how do you leave that in place? And again, it comes back down to something I've thought about. You've got Congress who you would think Congress would act to try and close some of these loopholes, to make the tax code a little fairer, to help the working class to at least have an opportunity to make ends meet. It's just one of those things that it's quite shocking to me.
Some of the, if you want absurd stories, well, there's a section where I talk about these luxury concierges that you could kind of ask them for anything you want, essentially. There's something, Amex has something called the Black Card, the Centurion card, that it only gives to the super rich clients. And if you have the Black Card, you can kind of go into any fancy resort. They'll upgrade you and they'll fawn over you and bring you the best bottle of champagne for free because, you're a whale, right? And so people supposedly use this card. Somebody wanted to buy the actual horse that Kevin Costner rode in Dances with Wolves. So Amex tracked down this horse in Mexico and had it delivered to the guy. There was another one where some family in Europe wanted some dead sea sand for their child's school project. And so they dispatched a motorcycle courier to the Red Sea, got some actual sand and delivered it to London.
Yeah, of course they did. Yeah, and you see, this is the kind of stuff that infuriates me when we've got kids who go to bed hungry at night, and they're folks go, no big deal, and we give them tax breaks. Look, I'm okay with you pay your taxes, you do whatever you want with your money, but at the end of the day, when we have a tax code that's set up on rewarding, the kind of accumulation of wealth that is bad for democracy, that's bad for for the kind of system we have, I struggle with that.
I struggle with it too, and I wonder if it's ever going to change. I had a moment of hope, kind of when the Democrats took over and people were up in arms about George Floyd, and it just seemed like there was change afoot. And after this last year, I'm beginning to feel skeptical.
Yeah.
I wanted to have some hope, and I hope I still can.
Well, we'll see how it goes. But Mike, I appreciate the time, man. Good stuff. I hope you'll come back and talk to us again at some point down the road. Good luck with the book. I hope folks will check it out.
All right. Thanks so much.
Good stuff. Michael Mechanic, his book, Jackpot, How the Super Rich Really Live and How Their Wealth Harms Us All. We'll get links out on social media, how you can take a look at that and get that. Maybe give it as a gift, something that you can absolutely use. And the thing that gets me is, look, what's frustrating on so many levels is that we have a system that rewards greed and really punishes work. And this is the thing that I've been really frustrated with for quite some time. As a working class person, I come back to this. Hey, wouldn't it be great? Wouldn't it be great if we actually had reward for work? Wouldn't it be great if we actually rewarded, if that whole work hard, play by the rules, get ahead thing was actually something that, happened? That people earned decent wages, that they had reasonable security of health and retirement. I'm glad he brought up the point of, half the country has virtually no wealth whatsoever. And the view is, well, they just weren't working hard enough. When the truth of the matter is, those are the folks who are doing all the freaking work. It's just, well, congratulations. You were unlucky in birth, unlucky in health, unlucky in status, unlucky in, education, unlucky in a whole bunch of places. Oh, and maybe a couple of people did make bad choices. Maybe there were some off-ramps that were taken that probably weren't great. There were a handful. But the majority of people, sorry, not all of us get to be born on third base and say, hey, we hit a triple. That's the thing. And it's something most certainly we have to work But make sure you check out the book Jackpot. We'll get links out on social media. If you're just joining us, make sure you grab the podcast over at thericksmithshow.com or wherever you get your podcasts, from iHeart to iTunes, Stitcher to Podbean, and everywhere in between. Right back after this. Stick around. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1942. That was the day a house fire claimed the life of a true champion for working people. Lucy Gonzalez Parsons was born in Texas. Most of her childhood is a mystery, but it is thought she was born into slavery and was African American, Mexican American, and Native American. After the Civil War, she met and married a Confederate soldier, Albert Parsons. The couple had to leave Texas because they were in danger due to their anti-segregationist activism. They came to Chicago, where they became involved in the city's labor movement. Albert edited The Alarm, a newspaper for working people. Lucy helped to write for the paper. Together, they supported the fight for the 8-hour workday, giving speeches throughout the city. Albert was one of the 8 men tried for the bombings at a workers' rally at Chicago's Haymarket Square in 1886. Although it was clear he was not even present when the bomb was thrown, Albert was convicted and hanged. After losing her beloved husband, Lucy kept up the fight for working people. She was a founding member of the IWW, the Industrial Workers of the World. She continued to speak and write for the causes of women's rights and workers' rights. Because of her activism, the Chicago police called her more dangerous than 1,000 rioters. In 1915, she helped to lead a hunger march of thousands of people in Chicago. At the march, the iconic labor song Solidarity Forever was sung for the very first time. Solidarity forever, solidarity forever, solidarity forever, for the union makes us strong. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Republican politicos are all over Joe Biden for failing to stop inflation. Perhaps you wonder, though, what these squawkers would do if they were in charge. No need to wonder. Just look back to 1974, when Americans were being pummeled by price spikes that topped 12%, nearly double what we're enduring today. But by gollies, President Gerald Ford and his Republican contingent in Congress met the challenge head-on with a new magical program of economic uplift they called WIN, Whip Inflation Now. But it was nothing, just a political slogan with no magic and no action behind it. Price controls, antitrust action? No. GOP Inc. didn't want to offend, much less punish, corporate titans for a little profiteering. So they shifted the blame for inflation to consumers, demanding that families just say no to price gouging. Ford himself went on national TV, urging fellow citizens to join him in buying, quote, only those products and services priced at or below present levels. The core of the Republican program, then, was telling hard-hit wage earners to battle the monopolistic behemoths of big oil, big pharma, big food et al. On their own, by simply refusing to pay inflated prices for the gasoline, medicines, groceries, and such that, hello, they had to have. As a reward, everyone who signed a form promising to be an inflation fighter was sent a nifty win button, indicating their patriotic participation. Sure enough, Americans responded enthusiastically, with an avalanche of ridicule. Even Ford's top economic advisor was whopper-jawed by the GOP's idea that the substance of their policy was a political button. It was surreal. I said to myself, this is unbelievable stupidity.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So the GOP's got their plans. That's right. They now have a plan going forward. And yes, it's going to be repeal the dreaded Obamacare. It's back. It's back. That's right. Ron Johnson, senator from Wisconsin. This is what he's running on, man. Running on bringing back the repeal of the dreaded Affordable Care Act. That's right. I guess that's it. So you've got Rick Scott, raise taxes on working people, and Ron Johnson, dreaded Obamacare. And look, there are going to be stupid people who vote for both of them. Yes. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on maybe this is a winning strategy. Maybe this is it. Here to share some thoughts on the top stories of the day. Our good friend, former Ohio Congressman and political analyst Bob Ney. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Well, thank you, Rick.
So you think this is a winner this time around? You think they're finally going to get to kill off the dreaded Obamacare?
Rick, if they get, for example, 68 seats in the Senate, 68, they won't repeal Obamacare, okay? If they get 75 seats, if they get 100, they're not going to repeal Obamacare. It's not going to happen. They're not going to do it. I mean, they're saying this. Remember they said this before to get votes?
Yeah.
And then they got control and they did nothing. They didn't, not only did they not do away with it, they didn't have any other version. They didn't tweak anything. They did, nothing. I mean, this is a tired, old running mantra that Johnson's coming out with for some reason. Somebody told him to. But, I mean, what would they, if they did, what do they think they would replace it with? What would they do?
Pay or die. Pay or die, Bob. Pay or die.
People.
Pay or die. That's the plan. And it fits nicely on a bumper sticker.
Mm-hmm. What's funny about this is that their supporters criticized them so much about not doing anything last time. And now he comes back out with the same old thing.
Yeah.
And the supporters know that he's not even that they're not going to do it. But they'll use this as a rally cry, to get the Obamacare.
Now, the thing that gets me is, as I was reading through the article, even the person who wrote the article said, this is, over at Political Wire. They said, the Republicans have tried this over 100 times and failed each and every time. So this is just, obviously a ploy, but the fact that they think this dog will hunt is quite remarkable to me.
Sure. Oh, it is. Last week, Mitch McConnell, the Republican minority leader, publicly rejected a proposal by Rick Scott of Florida. And Rick Scott had I think this is interesting too. Rick Scott, Republican senator, released an 11-point Rescue America plan, sort of like trying to create a contract,
I have it on my desk.
Plan. Right. 11-point Rescue America plan. It would require all Americans to pay some form of an income tax, eliminate the Department of Education, which was years ago the same thing, build the border wall.
And name it after Trump.
He didn't say Mexico had to pay for it, but build the border wall and declare in his I'm laughing because in his American Rescue Plan to rescue America, he would have to declare there are only two genders.
Yeah.
You got to declare that because if you don't, America doesn't get rescued. Now, with all of this, plan he's coming out with, McConnell rejected it. But you've got to remember too, Donald Trump is in contact with Rick Scott to replace Mitch McConnell. So you got all this internal deal. But here you have a plan aired by a senator, Republican, that the minority leader, technically his boss, Mitch McConnell, rejects. Then you got Ron Johnson coming out with his repeal the Affordable Care Act. So they are not on the same page by any stretch of the imagination with each other.
Yeah, well, they're on the Trump page. And look,
that's it.
I think they think Trump is going to win in 24, and they want to be part of the very best cabinet probably going forward. Because I was looking at some of the names in the best cabinet ever, only the very best people cabinet. And, you look at some of these people who have now come back and just ripped into him, like Tillerson and Esper and Mattis and, Kelly and Mulvaney and McMaster and your buddy Bolton, a whole bunch of, and Billy Barr. But the difference with Billy Barr, though, is Barr did say he would vote for him again, which is just freaking nuts.
Right. That didn't spare him in the Trump letter. But what really amazes me about this, right now the Democratic side is on, obviously, the defense, okay, because of a lot of factors. So they're on the defense, and there's a whole struggle out here for control of the House and the Senate. Wouldn't you think that there would be either leadership or common sense that they would, at least try to kind of get together, try to kind of be on the same page? And if it weren't for Trump right now, I think, Rick, they would probably have some form of cohesiveness, if not for Trump.
Yeah.
And because of Trump, they don't.
No, I think the only reason the Democrats have a chance of not getting slaughtered in November is because of Trump.
Trump.
To be honest, because he's so divisive, and because you've got so many really insane people on the Republican side that are, we just, I like Billy Barr's comment. He was, one of the things that he said on NBC News I thought was hysterical. He pointed out that Trump lost Wisconsin by 50,000 votes, and that he had run 50,000 votes behind the rest of the Republican ticket. He said the party in Wisconsin did well. They had a great day. He said that it was Trump who was the weak sister on the ballot, which I thought was a great line.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right, because if you take the Trump theory, there were wins in states. Trump lost in those states. So therefore, there was such a sophisticated theft level, Rick, that somebody could go in and manipulate only the presidential vote. That's what they manipulated, only the presidential vote. But the Republicans who won within that state, that was okay. That was left alone. It was only the presidential vote that was manipulated, if you take that theory.
Amazing. But look, he gave his little spiel over the weekend to the Republican donors in New Orleans, and that was part of it still. Hey, 2020 was stolen. He wants to dress up an American plane with a Chinese flag and bomb Russia and blame China. He wanted all of his people to snap to like they do in North Korea. There was a lot of stuff that came out in his little conversation.
Right, when he and he joked about starting a war between Russia, and China. And that's the one thing too that really does well. There's two things that helps the Democratic side. One is if they recruit off the wall, bad candidates. But the second is definitely if Trump, well, not if, as Trump continues to relive the last election.
Yeah. Now, obviously, Mike Pence came out, threw some shots, which I'm guessing it won't be Trump Pence 24.
No, I don't think so. No, it might not be Trump any. It might be just Trump.
Could be. Not JFK Jr.
No, I mean, has there ever been? I know, I saw that. Has there ever been? Can you just run as yourself and the VP at the same time? Is there anything constitutionally against that?
I don't know. I think you would have I think you would know better than I would. I don't think so.
No,
because I think there's that secession thing. I think if you were to die, unless you can come back from the dead and then fill that spot, maybe. Although people think he's the second coming, so maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Mike Pence came out and said that something about the effect there's not room in the GOP for apologies for Putin, and says that I think he said elections are about our future, and he stayed away from the past one. So Pence is not on the ticket.
That's a shame. That's an absolute shame.
Everybody's swiping at Trump, his friends and his enemies.
Poor Trump. And everyone's leaving his Truth Social site too. Everyone's going back to Twitter because evidently the launch of Truth Social, not so good. Did you get yours? Did you get your Truth Social?
No, I didn't hear much about that at all after it had its stumble and then launched. Not much at all.
And it wasn't much of a stumble. It just more of a flop.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't much stumbling going on.
Well, I think the first day they had a technical glitch when they tried to put it up.
Yeah, it was all bad. It was all, and it still is. I mean, I have an account. You can't search people. You really can't interact. I mean, it's really it's difficult. But it is what it is. I also wanted to get your thoughts on Tom Cotton. Evidently, Tom Cotton's about to compare Trump to Reagan in an upcoming big speech. Curious your thoughts. Is there a comparison between Trump and Reagan?
Well, I mean, Tom Cotton argues that Trump and Reagan share common roots in the Republican Party. Is what he's saying, and he said they have similar roots. He said Reagan understood what the Republicans should be, and that they were elected, to protect the American people, et cetera.
Right.
Then he says that Reagan and Trump, a lot of people say represent polar opposites, stood in that type of tradition of basically understanding what they need. I don't compare them. Reagan, I think if Reagan were alive today, I think Trump would be probably, criticizing him heavily, going after him. No question about that in my mind. But Tom Cotton's Tom Cotton, and the fact that he says this, I don't think counts, obviously, for the history books. But again, there are Trump supporters that will, compare him to Reagan. But I mean, Reagan didn't do, 1/4 of the things Trump did, and going after people personally, and attacking his own cabinet. I mean, you just didn't have that.
Yeah, look, I was not a fan of Reagan's policies. He was an okay actor. I mean, he was fun to listen to, but policy-wise was not on board. I don't think he's recognizable in today's Republican Party on any level whatsoever.
Right, and also Reagan had, whether, I don't know, people say he was acting or not, but Reagan, I think, had, deep feelings and sympathy for people, when the shuttle exploded.
Yep.
I mean, I can't imagine where Cotton would think that Reagan had such a narcissistic attitude that he would be comparable to Trump. I can't imagine.
Yeah, it's amazing. Let me ask you, the story coming out that Chuck Grassley is not interested in moving the Supreme Court nominee along. There's talk of possibly trying to boycott the confirmation or stall it somehow in committee. Is this something that's possible?
I don't think it's possible. I don't think it is. I don't think it's politically possible. I really don't. Now he is talking about Ketanji Brown, Jackson's Supreme Court nomination shouldn't be put in what he calls an arbitrary timeline, and the Democrats need a full and thorough vetting process, is what he originally was going after. And he said there's no need to rush, but I can't imagine in this entire process that he would be able to stop it. I think it's, unless there's something we don't know, unless there's something that hasn't come out, I think it's virtually unstoppable.
Good. I mean, I think it's something that has to go forward, because I'd gotten a couple of emails from people going, "Oh, they're going to derail her, her nomination." I'm going, "No,
they won't.
I don't think so."
No, and I still think she's going to get a couple of Republican votes. So I can't see where it's going to be derailed. I don't see that it politically benefits the Republicans to derail her nomination. And also, I don't know, politically speaking, Rick, why would he want this nomination, which is going to be popular, to go closer to the election? I mean, why would you want that? To stall it?
Well, I would argue
sense.
the idea is, if you can get it closer to the election, make the argument, hey, conservatives, this is something for you to come crazy to vote for. Because, hey, we could steal another Supreme Court seat, so we could make it 7-2 instead of 6-3.
Mm-hmm. They could argue that, but it would be such a stretch. They couldn't do a McConnell on this one, as McConnell did before, because they would have to wait an entire bizarre length of time to a new presidential election. So, and I know he might use it for the election purposes, but it's just not going to happen. It will not, again, unless there's something we don't know. And she's been through the process already,
right?
So that's highly unlikely that she will be confirmed.
Yeah, and look, there have been some very nice things said about her by a number of people. So we'll see where it goes. I'm hoping it goes through quickly, because look, there are other problems going on in the world. There are other things that are just as pressing, if not more so.
Right.
Just my thoughts. But Bob, I appreciate the time as always. Good stuff.
Thank you.
Our good friend Bob Ney. Seriously, I hope we get through this. I know that as one person who emailed me said that they want to derail this, hold it off, so that they can just keep it open indefinitely, so that when Donald Trump comes in January of 2023, after they have impeached Biden and Harris and installed Trump as secretary or as Speaker of the House, and then obviously he has ascended to the presidency, and he can then choose somebody to go in that space. That's not my statement. That's one of the emails that I got that I found most comical. I want to throw a shout out to Senator Sherrod Brown, who good on the senator. I am thrilled with the announcement that he and my Senator Bob Casey are moving forward and introducing a piece of legislation that I think is a good one. It is the Striking Workers Health Care Protection Act. This will ensure that when workers go on strike, their health care will not be cut off immediately, that workers will still have access to their health care. And it's happened numerous times across the country. It's one of the first things that does happen. Anybody who's ever been on strike knows that when these companies, the ones who hold the health insurance, and this is where I've argued for years, unions make a strategic error in allowing companies to hold the health insurance. This is where I think my Teamsters union has done a very smart thing, and they are the ones who control the health care. The company pays the union to administer the health care, and it's a benefit that if you go on strike, it's something that they can continue, and they do, and that is a good thing. It should be in the contract that says if there is a work stoppage, that the health care continues as it would. But this is a law that would say that can't happen. They point out that the GM strike, that GM dropped the healthcare workers' health insurance during the 2019 strike. All of the BCT GM strikes that went on, that we saw, their health care was cut off. We saw the John Deere workers, that happened. The strike that's still going on down in Alabama at Warrior Met Coal, same thing there. Now, I tweeted this out today, and I got a bunch of responses from people going, well, this is why we need national health care. Absolutely. I agree. Take the win. I'm with you. Understand, I am with you on the national health care front. I am with you on the Medicare for all. I'm there. As someone who has union health care, I am willing to say yes, everyone should have what I have. I don't think it should get worse than what I have. Everyone should have the best health care possible to where if you get sick, you're taken care of. You're not worried about going bankrupt. You're not worried about if they're, am I in network? Am I going to get hit with a co-insurance? Oh my gosh, is my surgeon in network? But is this guy not? It just covers it. And this is why we definitely need a national plan. One giant Teamster plan. I'd be okay with that. One giant union health care fund. Every working person has health care. That sounds good to me. But we're not there yet. We're not going to get there for a while. I would love to have one giant Medicare for all pot. Everybody in. Rich, poor, old, young, sick, healthy, everybody. basic insurance, everybody. So understand where I'm at, right there, 100%. Let me let you in on reality. Ain't going to happen. So, in the moment realizing that it's not going to happen, we need to fix problems that are in place right now so that tomorrow we can make sure bad things don't happen to people who have health insurance today. This is one of those pieces of legislation. Hope I've explained that well. Want to make sure that when workers go on strike for better wages, hours, conditions, that their health insurance doesn't get cut off immediately. Because it's one of those strong arm tactics that employers pull to force people back to work and into bad contracts. So by this legislation would say, look, basically, you can't cut them off immediately. Has to run through its course. I think that's sane. I think it's rational. It has a bunch of co-sponsors. I'm looking forward to seeing this, making its way to being debated. I'm looking forward to seeing this potentially making its way to the House. Now, Republicans, every one of them will vote against it. They will be vehemently opposed to it because anything that will support workers' ability to fight for better wages, hours, conditions, to make their lives better, Republicans are against. And this is where, in this moment, we are in a very polar opposite world when it comes to who's on the side of workers and who is not. Republicans right now are trying to pivot. They're trying to say, oh, we care about you working stiffs. We care about you peasants. We don't want you to wear a mask. That's basically their argument. Oh, we want you to not have to wear a mask or get a vaccine. We want you to get sick and die. So you don't have health insurance. So we're okay with you getting sick. We're okay with you not having health insurance. Yeah, we're okay with all that because you got freedom to get all that stuff. But we don't want to make sure that you have health insurance or be able to pay for any of that. We don't want to make sure that you have the ability to fight for better wages, hours, conditions, to lead a better life. No, can't have that. But this imaginary thing over here, that's the pivot. And we're in this moment where, we're going to hopefully see at some point more legislation like this. And I keep telling my Democratic friends, you need to stand up, step forward, and put forth things that are going to make people's lives better. Force Democrats to stand up and take a side. This must get a vote. And if there's a Democrat who votes against it, they got to go. To me, it's that simple. Because for too long, what's happened, and I go back to the reason that I started this one of the reasons I started this show. One of the reasons was, now obviously it was the balance, some measure of balance in the airwaves from the extreme right-wing dominance that dominates talk radio. But the other part of it is, for years I sat in union halls listening to politicians tell me about all the things they're going to do. And I tell the story all the time of the 2 times I met Barack Obama as a candidate. And both times he told me, we're going to get the Employee Free Choice Act and it's going to be better and it's going to be great. And we got nothing. He wasn't unique. There were a lot of politicians who told those stories. Oh, we're going to do this. It's going to be wonderful. We're going to make your lives better. And they never do. My goal in this was to get them on air and saying, look, we're going to hold your feet to the fire. Now is the time to hold Democrats' feet to the fire. Holding them accountable is not beating them up. Holding them accountable is giving them the backing to do what they want to do. Holding them accountable and letting them know that we are here gives them the cover to do what needs to be done. And expose the fact that the entire Republican establishment is against it. It seems pretty simple to me. It seems pretty simple in this day that I've been doing this show 17 years now. I've been asking the question, name me one piece of legislation a Republican has proposed and moved forward that would make workers' lives better. And no one's come up with anything. I get a lot of, we got tax cuts. You mean those tax cuts that disappeared already? Yeah. There hasn't been one. And that's why, again, we've got to organize, we've got to stand together, we've got to stand up, and we've got to fight. That's simple. If you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.